Hey, I'm Jeff Perkins. These are the Soundstripe Sessions. This is a podcast about the space between inspiration and execution. That's where the real story lives. We sit down with world-class creators and storytellers to unpack the craft, the creative decisions, the roadblocks, and the breakthroughs that shaped their best work. For anyone who makes things and wants to make them better. Today, I want to welcome Jonah Feingold to the podcast. Jonah is a super talented independent filmmaker. He's based in New York City. His most recent film is the rom-com 31 Candles. And he also does a lot of short films that you can find on his YouTube page. In addition to being a filmmaker, he's also an entrepreneur. He makes a lot of short films in collaboration with different brands. And so I'm really excited for this conversation. Jonah, thank you for being here.
Honored to be here. Thank you for that lovely introduction. Always a lot of pressure when you're on a podcast with a auditory, with a company that values the sound quality of something. So I'm hoping I sound okay and that I know what I'm saying and that the microphones do their jobs, because a lot of pressure.
Well, you sound good. You sound good, man. And again, thanks for being here. I'm excited for this conversation. So let's talk a little bit about your origin story. How did you get into filmmaking?
My origin story is that I saw the movie Hook when I was like 2 years old. Robin Williams, Dustin Hoffman, directed by Steven Spielberg, Julia Roberts, Glenn Close, who plays a sort of cameo role. Phil Collins plays the detective. I could go on for Hook lore. But it changed my life. I saw that movie. I watched it every day for like 5 years. I used to dress up as Captain Hook to school every day. It wasn't Halloween. And I knew that I was basically either really screwed and not going to be cool, or that I had a passion for storytelling. Turns out both were true. And I started filming things. My dad had a camera in his closet, ZR-10 Canon. And I started filming my sister and my dogs, and I've pretty much just been making things and releasing things since 1994. And sometimes those budgets are $3 million, and sometimes those budgets are negative $300,000. And it's been a dream since then.
And what was it about Hook that really got you into it? I mean, were you a Peter Pan fan and just the retelling of that story, or what was it about that?
It's the perfect metaphor for filmmakers and creatives. People think that Spielberg made The Fabelmans as a biographical film. I believe Hook is his most biographical work. It is about never losing your inner child. Has very little to do with Peter Pan, in my opinion. I like the cartoon, but there's something about the magic of that movie. It's about never forgetting that you're a kid. And obviously, as a kid watching it, how was I to know that one day one of the biggest themes of our adult lives would be never forgetting our inner child as a creative? And yet it does that in its cinematography. It's mystical and magical and uses shadows and these long takes. And the score for Hook is one of the John Williams' best scores, not to mention the motifs and everything's real and tactile. And I think that's also why it's held up so well for me, is that everything is magic and make-believe. But ironically, it's all real because it's all practical sets, and it's real emotions and real stakes. It's about a father who doesn't know his kids, who's a bad husband and who's lost, his inner light, And so that for me, I look back and I'm like, why does this movie resonate? Well, it's because it's an incredibly powerful metaphor for creativity and for storytelling.
Okay, so Hook kind of got you into filmmaking. What are some of your other influences? What are the other films that really kind of
Hook
got
was the gateway drug.
Yeah.
My parents were like, look, you can't keep watching Hook. You got to put something else on. So luckily my dad had laser discs. He still has them. And I should say my parents are not in the film business, but my dad is very tech savvy. My mom is very creative. And filmmaking is the perfect mold of that. And so we were one of the first people, I would say, to have a quote unquote media room where my dad set up a Laserdisc player, built a projector to project it onto a wall, and had 5.1 surround sound because he bought a big subwoofer and put it under a couch. And I remember watching Jurassic Park, and we would watch Jumanji, and it was called the Red Couch, and we watch a movie there every weekend. And Star Trek, and I'm just actually getting chills thinking about these times because I haven't thought about this in a while. But, we'd watch these movies, and eventually my influences would become sort of the films of yesteryear, screwball comedies, movies by Howard Hawks and Frank Capra and Billy Wilder and Ernst Lubitsch. And the reason I sort of got drawn to these filmmakers was because I was really curious to see where my favorite filmmakers got their technique from. And I became obsessed with the origin of that. And so those are sort of my major influences these days. If I need to feel creatively inspired, I'll go watch like a random Lubitsch film and try to take something from that and, hope no one notices.
But, you were, you loved film early on, you were making film, but at one point, do you think, this is what I can do for my career? This is what I would do to maybe earn a living. I mean, how do you make that jump? Because, so many people who are movie crazed as their kids and they're making short films, but not many actually make that leap and become professional filmmakers like you.
I don't know I think I was lucky enough that I never doubted that it would be the career, because it was the only thing I really knew was what I committed to at a young age. And I didn't really think twice about it. It's almost like, when people are playing a sport when they're super young, so dribbling becomes very secondhand to them, or hockey, or, so I luckily, that's creating things for me. I never even took into consideration. Sometimes I have these like moments of like, well, what am I doing, with my life? But it's never that I'm not going to keep doing this. It's just examining the business side of it and how it's going to work. The biggest jump I think I made, which is fun because it's like a video game, right? All this stuff is like a video game where you get to a certain level, there's a door that's closed, you don't have the right key, or you get into the wrong room and you die because you don't have the right weapon. But then it's so silly to go back into that room later on when you have all the right weapons, and it's like a cheat code because it's so easy. And I think for me early on, the thing that was the big level I couldn't get up to was making my first feature film, which is you make shorts, you make videos, and the feature is kind of the great white whale or the great, the great white shark. What's the great white whale? But it wasn't inherently clear to me how to do it for so long. And once I sort of tossed all the rules out of the book, then I made it. Then I made the first feature. And from that moment on, there was a level of professionalism that I had, and I got so much stronger as a filmmaker and have grown exponentially since with every movie I make, and it's kind of crazy because I think about people who have made 100 movies in their lifetime or whatever, 50 even. And I'm like, they must just know so much about how to create a film because your growth is exponential every time you make something and release it, which is usually where people mess up. And the biggest advice I always have for people is make something, put it out there, continue to move on, but get better and be honest with yourself about how to get better.
So talk about your first big break. Obviously you went to USC, right? For film school?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
USC
great film school.
Yeah.
But how many people were in your graduating class at USC?
Well, there's USC graduating class. I believe there's thousands, but the film school gets down to about 500. And then my unit was called production, and there were only 50 of us. To this date, one of my best friends is a very successful director, and I produced his thesis film his senior year, and it's kind of just now we're talking about movie stars. And, 10 years ago, we were talking about elementary schools that we had to go film in because they were free on the weekends. So It's pretty fun.
So you get out of this really elite film school, but what was your first big break? What was the moment where you, whether it's that getting that chance to make the feature, but like that you're like, man, I could make a career in this thing now. I think I've broken through.
I've had two big breaks. And one was when I was working at a YouTube MCN. One night I came home and I re-edited the Star Wars Force Awakens trailer to be Star Wars Wes Anderson. And I posted it online, 2014, went viral on Reddit, and it got 1.5 million views in 48 hours, which back in 2014 was a lot of views on YouTube. And I got written about in every magazine. I don't know why. I do not know why this went so viral in terms of the press. I got calls from management companies. I got calls from agents. That was a break for me because it at least subconsciously taught me the power of making noise on the web. it kind of it was the first feeling of going viral, which I don't know, anyone who's experienced this, it's a really fun feeling. It's even more fun when you're going viral for your art, not just like a silly clip of you buying something at Target. It's like you're going viral because you made something and people resonated with it. And then 10 years later, the next big break moment was when my first feature film, Dating in New York, got into Tribeca Film Festival. I consider that to be as classic as it gets in terms of a break. Now it's incredibly more nuanced than that. Obviously, I think film festivals are slightly irrelevant today, so I got lucky in terms of that time frame. I also know I made the most of it. I know that your break can be very relative. You just need a little bit of juice, and you can make it into your break if you frame the narrative correctly. And it's not that you're lying; it is all a matter of perspective. Some people go to a film festival and they don't even go with their next movie idea, or they don't go decide and meet everybody there, and they don't go and figure out the optics. Like, we were the only rom-com there. We were the only independent movie that got into a bidding war. And when I say it like that, it sounds impressive, but we were also technically the only independent movie there that was not already purchased. So it's it's just perspective. So I think that was a big break, but I also, just as I don't believe in the big break concept, I think it's like you have to frame these milestone moments around the success of what you did, in an honest way.
Yeah. The Star Wars Wes Anderson is still on your YouTube page, right? I've seen
I
that
believe
recently.
It still is on my YouTube page. Yeah, I think it's the first, it might be like video one. On the video.
It's so good. And I think you've got like millions of views of it at this point, because it's been out there for a while. Yeah. Which is funny. I mean, how long did that take you to do?
2 hours. There's a spelling mistake in it. That's another thing, because you make all these different short films and you spend thousands of dollars on them, and you cast your friends and you're like, hope it goes viral, hope people see it. And then you spend 2.5 hours, you make something with spelling mistakes and you put it out there in the world, and it just emotionally resonates with people. And I don't know what the takeaway there is besides you just should you never know. I mean, as Gary Vee says, it's like one piece of content can change your life.
Yeah, it's so true. But what I like about what you said about the film festival is, you didn't just go in and just take it for granted that you were there. You actually saw it as an opportunity to work the crowd, make connections, network, and tee up kind of your next project. And, I talked to a lot of musicians, filmmakers, storytellers on the show. And I think that's one of the through lines is that it's a lot of hard work beyond just the craft of building something like that, like being able to create a great song, a great film. It's almost table stakes. Like that's what you're supposed to do.
Right.
But it's the hard work beyond that's going to get you to the levels where you want to be, and that's going to make you the money you're going to want to make and the continued success that you're going to want to have.
It's exactly correct. When we were touring 31 Candles around, people said, what was the hardest part? And I said, making the movie is the easiest part. Getting people to care about it, getting it out here has been incredibly difficult, physically, psychologically, emotionally, financially. And in the case of Tribeca with Dating in New York, I mean, I had a script I wrote. I made a scan code when those were popular. And anytime a producer asked me what I was up to next, I said, scan this. And I was like, you have the weekend to read it. And then we sold it to Miramax. I remember this now. We sold it to Miramax, and it never got made. And I should say it was an option, but it could have gotten. So, they give you, let's call it $20,000 to option it. And then if you get the green light, that's where you kind of get those larger fees for a screenplay sale. We never got that far, unfortunately. But it did have something happened to it, because of that momentum of Tribeca.
I was looking through your YouTube page and your films. It's all rom-com.
Yeah.
It's all rom-com. So you've definitely picked your lane. It's the rom-com lane. What is it about rom-coms that appeals to you? That's made that kind of the genre that you're going to attack?
Well, for one thing, there's a lot of reasons. They are romantic comedies, and they are comedies with romance. That's what I like. I'm not necessarily talking about The Notebook. I'm sometimes talking about, you could talk about Casablanca, which I saw Casablanca in 35 millimeter recently. I had never heard a theater laugh and cry at the same time as much as they did, because it's a very funny movie, but it's also a very sad movie. And I think for me, rom-coms, it was a genre that I loved, but that was wildly disrespected and still is disrespected by critics. Yet, ironically, some of the greatest filmmakers in the world came up from making romantic comedies. Again, I'm going to talk about, It Happened One Night, the first rom-com, with the Frank Capra made, and whether it's Billy Wilder or, again, Lubitsch or Howard Hawks or any of these, David Lean, the greatest filmmakers in the world have made romantic comedies. I don't know why it stopped. I think they're very important to human nature. I think there's two powerful emotions in the world. There's fear and there's love. I believe love is more powerful. And you get that with a romantic comedy, right? Ideally, you're getting that. And I think that they just had, I was excited to dive into a genre that I felt like I wasn't seeing speaking to my generation at the time when I started to make these things. My dream is to make movies like Night at the Museum and Jumanji and The Goonies and these adventure films. But to me, these are all connected. It's just a genre, and it's got the highlighted emotions are comedy and romance. But I'm here to do what I would love to make a horror, a horror film that has comedy and romance. I'm trying to make ultimately great films, great movies that, is When Harry Met Sally a rom-com? Yeah, but it's also just a great movie. Rob Reiner obviously was sort of the master of making genre movies that transcended their own genre and were just good. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do. It's a little easier for me to go around pitching people that I'm building Blumhouse, but for rom-coms. Sometimes I think people need to sort of hear things simply. So that's also been helpful.
Yeah, it's interesting that the rom-com is sort of faded. Yet anytime there's a new rom-com that comes out, even if it's like average, everybody goes to see it. Like the last one was the Sydney Sweeney, Glenn Powell one. I think that was probably the last rom-com that I've seen. But you can believe my kids were like, that's what they wanted to see that weekend. And they hadn't been that excited for a movie in a long time.
It's, that's the thing. I mean, they're in human nature. Like the rom-com came out of the Depression era. That's when the first ones started coming out. People were depressed. Rom-coms were born. The interesting thing about that movie and, about some rom-coms is like, sometimes it's a lot of marketing. Sometimes you don't have to have the best movie. Sometimes it's the off-screen drama fuels the on-screen heat. And great marketing and great zeitgeisting and just sort of wanting to be part of the conversation can be enough to get a movie to really, get an audience to it. But they can be incredibly commercial. And Netflix makes, they have a rom-com of the week at this point where they're sort of making one of these things a week, and they do very well for them. I just think that sometimes people forget the artistry of what these films can be. And granted, not every filmmaker is capable of that, sometimes myself included.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's switch over to your creative process, right?
Yeah.
You write, you direct, you act in a lot of your films, but how do you get started with the idea? I mean, take us into the, you're kind of you're a one-man show writer. Are you in a writer's room, or are you writing most of it yourself?
I'm a one-man show in the sense that, for 90% of the stuff you see, I'm writing it myself. I'm starting it, I'm directing it, I'm editing it. I enjoy that because I can. When I make a movie like Busboys with David Spade and Theo Vaughn, they are the ones who wrote that script, and I have a producing team, and I have a cinematographer, and I have an editor. My next feature-length film is this movie with two wonderful comedians named Sam Morrell and Mark Normand, and they wrote this script with their friends Noah and Esther. It's very much a communal movie, and that'll have an editor and a cinematographer and producers and a costume designer and a casting director. For the YouTube stuff, it usually is me, myself, and a producer and a PA and talent that I want to work with. And so the creative process is basically, I try to find the least path of resistance. I've always been jealous of musicians because you guys can have an idea, go to your room, open up the tool, and record the song for the most part on your own. And filmmaking is a very expensive, big crew kind of process, but I've tried to figure out ways, not because I don't love collaborating, I love collaborating, but so much of what goes wrong in the Hollywood system is due to the amount of people involved. And usually those people being absolutely fucking nuts, excuse my language. So I've been rolling enough times that I'm kind of like, I'm a little jaded, and I'm like, what can I do so I can only work with people who I enjoy working with, who aren't going to screw me over, and who are creatively talented?
Take us though into, your process overall. I mean, where, are you, you just sit down with a notebook, or you're out on the street, you're inspired, or you went on a date, you come home after the date, you're like, this inspired me. I mean, give us a sense of where you start with the idea, and then how do you take it to where you're ready to start filming something?
Yeah. So for the feature length films I make, I usually have an idea, and I spend a lot of time. I'll even walk you through the tech of it all too. So I take notes I recently started using a tool called Obsidian, which is a markdown based note taking app. I find it to be great because it's sort of, again, it uses markdown. So it's sort of like the text lives forever. And usually you'll get a note in there from me that says, movie idea, 270-year-olds wake up in their 20-year-old bodies. This is my new movie I'm writing. And this idea came from a conversation with my mom where she was talking about her dating life. My parents are divorced, but they're good friends. And I was like, okay, there's a movie here. It makes me uncomfortable, so I got to make a movie about this. And then that movie has taken me almost 2 years to write. And it's all usually walking around the city, living my life, and it's ideas that come up here, and it takes a while for it to come onto the computer. But people maybe don't realize writing doesn't happen in front of the laptop. That's just the execution of the dialogue and the story. Most of the writing and the plot happens when you're walking around, and that's where I've learned to be a better writer, because I used to sit in front of my computer for 5 hours and be like, I got to write 5 pages. I was wrong. That's not when it happens. It happens by you think about it, doing other things, and you go to the computer, you update the program, so to speak. So then I'll write that script. I'll use either Final Draft or a tool called Highland Pro. I'll print it out. I'll send it to people. I'll rework it. I'll think about it. I'll let time pass. That's for a feature film. For the YouTube shorts, those will be, I have a little notebook. I'll write down ideas, and then I'll usually go into, again, an Obsidian note. And I try to stay away from Final Draft as much as I can for those, because I never want it to feel too scripted. And so it's rarely is the dialogue spot on scripted. There's lines, but other times it's situations, and there's like shot ideas, and I'll have like a visual guide. I'll find paintings, or I'll have a shot. I had an idea for a scene where the two characters are out of sync. So her mouth is out of sync from her dialogue, and my character is like, what are you doing? You're out of sync. So I just wrote that down on a piece of paper, and then it made its way to the Obsidian. Then it made its way into the movie, and I'll edit my stuff in DaVinci Resolve. I'll color it there. I'll do some audio work there. And I would say that's pretty much the process. Usually in the morning, it's when I'll like sit down from like 8 till 11, and that'll just be in front of the computer trying to see what we can get done. I will always get distracted, and I will find myself either trying to code something in Claude, or build a deck out on something, or responding to emails, or thinking about ways to distribute my work better. I've been using a tool called ManyChat, which allows me to get automatic commenting and DMs to people on Instagram to convert them to viewers on my YouTube page. And I'm thinking about how to use that to convert those to email addresses that I'll then add to my Substack. So my brain is kind of like, my dream is to be someone who had a set routine, but I learn more and more that I'm like, A, I work better at night, which I hate because I love going to sleep early. And B, it's just kind of everything everywhere all at once. Also a great film.
At what point in the process, as you're playing around with idea, are you like, I got it, this is it, and I'm going to take it? Or do you have a book full of ideas that you just stopped because they're just like, I think there's something here, but I'm not sure. But at what point are you like, yes, like you're the 70-year-olds that wake up in the 20-year-old body?
Yeah.
Where you just came up with that and you're like, yeah, I'm all in, I'm going to go with this. Or, do you you have a lot of different ideas that are sort of, you keep warm until you really know that you have something?
It's a great question. There's two answers to that. One is I'm a quick decider when it comes to ideas. Same way when I'm watching tapes from an actor, it doesn't take me long to know that they're right or wrong. When I'm working with my composer on a cue, it doesn't take me very many listens to tell you if it's right or wrong. It's never like I'll listen to it 5 times and be like, you know what, that was it. It's usually like the first time I'm like, this isn't right, or it's perfect. And for ideas, if it becomes a full idea, it's usually, it's going to go into the notebook and we're going to come back to it. Or I usually do a 24-hour test. Can I not stop thinking about it? And usually those ideas are reverse engineered from, is it personal? Is there a reason I'm the only person who has something to say about this right now? And that's usually something that will do it. And then it's another question, which is this a movie I can only make right now that I cannot make another time? And so the movie about the 7-year-old parents, I'm like, well, this is a movie directly about how I feel about my parents. And it's about, if you could go back and do it all over again with the same person, would you? And to me, that's an incredibly evergreen romantic concept that I have yet to see someone conquer. And then it's kind of like my parents are in their 70s and I want them to be a part of this process. So that's the why now. And so that's an idea that becomes crystallized. And now, yes, it's still taken me a while to write it because I've had a major breakthrough recently, and that took a year to just like, and I'm not saying I worked every day on a year, just kind of like, whatever. For the YouTube filmettes, the beauty of those is that it's not so precious. I can have a dumb idea, like a guy breaks up with his dating roster, and I can go make it. And maybe it hits, maybe it doesn't. And that's what I love. I love trial, and I love things that don't work and things that do work. And so, the next one we're circling was sort of an idea from one of my producing partners. And he was like, what if you're on a bachelor party and you meet a girl? And I was like, great. What if it's my bachelor party? And so that becomes a twist. So that's kind of how these ideas happen. It's kind of like when you're able to create consistently, it's fun because you can kind of just keep doing stuff, and you can use those small ideas on the bigger ideas.
So Jonah, what I really like about what you said there that I just want to reinforce is that you have an idea when you just can't stop thinking about it. And I hear this from a lot of creators, artists, musicians, even entrepreneurs, because they just feel like they have this thing. And one entrepreneur that I talked to, he's like, I knew I had it because it just took my breath away. And that's it. Sometimes maybe it's not quantitative, maybe there's not evidence, but you just kind of know in your gut that you have something, it feels like, which is kind of what I took away from that. But let's talk a little bit about how you make films. So you've done some stuff with Hollywood, but for the most part, you're an independent filmmaker, right? You're trying to figure out how to make your projects, how to fund them. Talk a little bit about that process. That seems highly challenging because films are just not cheap to make.
They're not. What I'll say is it changes every year, and I'm sort of in a really fun transitional phase right now. So when I made my first movie, it was a time where you could sort of make your independent movie, expect to go to a film festival, and expect a buyer. And I was, in a situation where that's exactly what happened. We raised $200,000 into a Wells Fargo account. We went to Tribeca Film Festival. We made $500,000. I got to call my buddies. They all made 2x return. Pretty once-in-a-lifetime situation. As a result of that, I got to make a movie for Paramount Plus, which that movie is now, and this is going to speak to what I'm talking about, that Paramount Plus movie is now on Disney Plus and Hulu. So shows you how volatile this industry is. Then I made a movie for Amazon Prime. And when you make these movies for streamers, yes, our budgets were low. They were small streamer films, but you have infrastructure. You have a marketing team. You have a release date. And you have a decent salary. It's like, it's not by any means what it should be or what it was in the 90s or 2000s, but it's, an entry-level graphic designer rate in New York City. And I get to live my dream and make a movie. And then I made an independent film called 31 Candles. I said to myself, what is it like if I go back out there and make another indie? And it's proven to be much more difficult in that the film business is crumbling. Independent film particularly is not designed to support independent filmmakers. Everything is conducive to what makes sense for an independent artist in terms of ownership and distribution and cooperation and marketing. And it's just hard, even when you make a movie that's good. It's this. And so I learned a really interesting lesson with 31 Candles, which is like, I'm never going to go back out there anytime soon and raise money for a single film in terms of an ROI opportunity. I think it's a very silly move to do that. One single chance to make your money back by the success or failure of your film in 2026 is a fool's errand. But what I did learn as a positive thing is how to play the independent theatrical system and what the problems were. I went to every theater we played at. I met the theater owners. I was like touring. I felt like Obama, when he's like going around. I went to Chicago and I went to Florida. I went to Delray, Florida, and I went to San Diego, and I met these people, and I was like, oh, you guys have been so screwed over by the studios for so many years that when a nice little independent film comes that's down to be cooperative, you get all weird. And to answer your question, I'm not making true indies where I'm the investor anymore. I'm going to be working with other people's money because it's just too much stress and pressure. Or I'm going to be working within the studio system. Or what I'm really building is my company Romantical, which to me is the solve for all this stuff. So that now when I go to invest an investor, currently right now we're raising $3 million to make 3 to 4 $300,000 independent movies over the course of 4 years. In addition to that, we're going to greenlight a series of unscripted and scripted YouTube, Instagram shows, and podcasts to build an ecosystem that will support the independent films so that the ROI for an investor becomes not only the success of potentially one of these movies, but also the brand ROI of integrations with the unscripted and digital shows, which becomes immediate revenue for the company. Not to mention the most important thing, which is that Romantical will fully own all the movies that it makes, and we will license our movies to streamers as opposed to selling them outright, unless, of course, the numbers make a lot of sense, but usually they don't. And to me, that's the future. To me, ultimately, if you want to be an independent filmmaker, you have to be an independent studio. And this is what you see creators doing. You see a lot of YouTubers and Instagram people. You can no longer just be a solo influencer. You need to build an ecosystem. You got to have your merch. You got to have your events. You got to have your product that you're pushing. So I'm excited for this thesis because I do believe it's also rom-coms, which they don't make enough of anymore. So there's sort of a missing gap. But that's the reality. The reality is the single independent film model, unless you're funded by people who don't care about making their money back, which there are a lot of people who exist in that space, it's just not business-wise. It's not fun,
Yeah, you're diversifying based on the media landscape.
Yeah.
And your YouTube and your Instagram and probably, I'm guessing those brand promotions or the brand collaborations are going to fund the bigger films.
Exactly.
And it's all going to kind of create a flywheel effect. So you're able to create a sustaining business, right?
Evergreen audience throughout the year via our unscripted podcasting, brands funding the movies funding the brand. It's all an ecosystem that exists. And the biggest sort of cheat code is that the staff is the above the line talent. So in a sense, and I think there's a little bit, I'm not saying this is not to be cocky, but I think us as directors, I'm the cheat code. You have a director who's at the helm of the company. I'm going to direct these movies. I'm going to hire writers who are high-level Hollywood writers, but they're going to be on salary. As my cinematographer, the person who shoots all our podcasts and our digital series is also going to be shooting the movies. And we'll hopefully try to do the same thing for talent, not to mention editorial will be salaried. And I look at Pixar and what they did, where they basically had all these brilliant minds on salary, and they were, as a result, to get a little bit more micro, they were able to make their movies better because they made their movies 100 times over and over again. When they made Toy Story 2 a bunch of times before it became the 99% Rotten Tomato movie that I love. But one of the problems when you make a movie is you're expected to go shoot 16 days and get everything you need. And then 2 years later when it's done, if you got to go get a pickup, it's going to cost a ton of money. You can't get your actors. You can't get your crew together. And by building an internal ecosystem and by scaling down the size of these stuff, you can make, I believe, higher quality work. And I'm super excited for that. I'm super excited for what's going on in terms of people's attention coming off of, going to YouTube and going to creators and direct to consumer audiences and the power of finding your niche and your audience. And that part is incredibly exciting.
Yeah. And it's a new model for independent film, though. It's just, you're still doing independent film.
Yes.
But you're attaching more components to it you're diversifying the risk, so it's not just one shot at the big film that gets distributed. It's a lot of different pieces that can generate consistent revenue. And so you actually have a sustainable business long term, and you can pay everyone the salaries. And I think it's a great concept. Who's going to fund that? I mean, what are the kind of investors you're looking at that are interested in funding that kind of business?
There are people who have met with me who are on the entrepreneurial side of things who have said, what are you building and how can I get involved? And there is some, in one instance, there's a guy who comes from traditional film financing, and he, a lot of these people are kind of just Jonah fans, to be honest. They're like, okay, that makes sense, but like, how do you make your money back? And I'm like, well, in one world, we sell to Paramount in 10 years, or to Netflix, or to Disney, or to a private equity. It becomes the brand IP. In the other world, we have a high multiple off of one of our 4 movies that we made for 300. If you make a great horror movie and you put it in theaters, look at Markiplier, who just made $50 million. And if you build our ecosystem to be strong enough and we make a high level romantic comedy for 300 grand and put it in 1,000 theaters and promote it properly and maintain ownership, there's real outcome there. So I would say it's people in media adjacent companies and people who have reached out to me, but it's also a living, breathing experience where I'm meeting people and getting sort of connected to different people who would be interested. But the consistent thing is that people seem to be interested in investing in creator-driven businesses. So that seems to be encouraging. So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, the truth is the traditional model is not working. The Hollywood model, and you look at even like news media, it's going the same way, where you have these big businesses that are spinning up, independent news media now. Yeah. And over time, they'll probably get acquired and consumed back into larger corporations. But for now, it seems like a lot of people are creating some very, very interesting independent businesses out of it, which it seems like you're doing on the entertainment side.
Yeah, and it's like, I guess half entrepreneur hat on. It's like you're looking to solve a problem. Well, my problem that I'm trying to solve for is, 1, they don't make rom-coms like they used to, and people love them. 2 is great movies are being made and they're not finding their audience. And, there's a movie with Chris Hemsworth and Monica Barbaro and, oh my God, incredible other amazing actors called Crime 101 that came out this past weekend. I don't know a single person who's seen it, and this happens every weekend, these great movies. And so what we're trying to solve for is a way to meet your audience where you are by kind of always catering to them, always being there for them, and I'm just trying to solve a problem that's like, why don't people care about movies anymore? Well, because they don't really know they exist, or they're not meeting them where they are. And ownership, which is the biggest problem, which is like absolutely insane to me that I've made 5 movies and I don't own any of them. And it's not like I got paid enough to have that be the case, so yeah. I don't know, that part's insane. And you can make a lot of money by owning your film and licensing it throughout the years. So we're just solving problems, we're trying to.
Yeah. Now I want to talk about your brand collaborations, because these are really interesting, because you're going to businesses and you're kind of bringing the creative filmmaking to the businesses that they can be a part of. Talk about some of the collaborations you've done and how you work those.
I love it. I've been lucky enough to work with places like Tinder and Built and Hinge, which is same company as Tinder, but different sort of departments. BetterHelp is a big one that I've worked with. Lucky in the sense that they've usually come to me and said, we like what you make. Can you make us something around our company? And I've been working in branded content since it became a term in 2000 whatever, 16, 14. The only difference is that now it's sort of become, my style has become more enhanced. So I can kind of ingrain it into, my pitch to them, it could be, I'm going to go make you a 20-minute movie or a 40-minute movie. And they're excited by that because there's a rewatchability. It doesn't live and die off of a 60-second reel that maybe goes viral, maybe doesn't. They're part of a live screening. There's sort of more to the experience that they get from it. And the goal with Romantical now, the next step is sort of, rather than chasing one-off brand deals, The goal is going to be looking for longer term partners, for more annual partners. And in turn, by scaling Romantical, I can offer them more. I can say, hey, hey, Red Bull, you guys are going to get a filmette. You're going to be the sole sponsor of our podcast about dating app tech. We're going to do a whole podcast about romantic tech that's like dating apps and AIs that help you flirt, all these different things. And I'm excited to be able to scale those opportunities because numerically they do really well given how much time and effort I have to put into them in terms of turnaround time. A movie takes a year and a half. A brand deal typically takes a month. So it's been very fun to be able to do that. Plus you own the work in most cases.
All right, let's talk about post-production. And specifically, this is sort of the lane that my company operates in, music. And how do you approach music selection for your projects? I mean, how do you go about it? You have some composers you work with. You're probably using some of the production libraries, but tell me about how you choose the songs for your projects.
It's pretty mixed. I for the feature-length films, I'm working with a composer I've worked with for the past every feature I've made, with the exception of Busboys. And, we have such a shorthand that we could probably score a whole movie without talking once. It's gotten to that level. For the YouTube and for the internet stuff, obviously those are lower budget and they're quicker turnaround. And Grant's a busy guy. And so it's been a really wonderful thing to be able to use other tools, libraries to help score stuff. Typically I'm looking at New York City romantic jazz. From a high level, I'm looking at orchestral. I'm looking at things that have very strong auditory motifs. I'm a guy who believes in the film score very much. If you can go on Spotify and find all my scores, they all have unique themes. They all, to me, are incredibly memorable. It's incredibly frustrating because literally no one else is doing it like we are doing it in the rom-com space. Never will get acknowledged for this. But I can't point to a single rom-com that has a proper live orchestra with themes and thought and motif and quiet. We're doing so much that it's like 90s, 80s stuff. It's like there. I really cannot point to is there a score to People You Meet on Vacation? Was the score to Anyone But You? What was the theme? What's the theme for the two characters? Every movie I make has a theme for the characters, for the relative story. So it's one of my favorite parts of the process. I think it's because of Hook. I think it's because I would listen to movie scores on the iPod. All the John Williams. I used to intern for Hans Zimmer. That's a fun fact for the podcast. And the process is that I usually it starts in the writing process. The second I start writing a script, I'm typically listening to film score. When I'm writing the movie Young at Heart about the 7-year-olds, I'm listening to the Marriage Story score. I'm listening to While You Were Sleeping. That's a great score. Randy Edelman, I think is who did that. So I love that stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, you believe, like we believe, that, the music actually is almost like a character, right? It's an important driving force in kind of setting the tone and then taking the story, kind of moving the story along.
Absolutely. I mean, I think George Lucas once said that music is 50% of the experience. Obviously, it's visual and audio. Music is a huge part of the character, and that's the way we usually approach it. That's when I talk to my composer, we're talking about what we're trying to say emotionally, and not enough directors know this, or producers really, because I think directors maybe do, but producers or executives won't. If you're watching an early cut of a movie, don't forget how much a score will do, not only to the timing of it, but to the emotionality of it. Really what I mean is, sure, music can sometimes make a scene feel more impactful. Sometimes it cannot also. It can take away from it. But what I mean is, if you have a shot of somebody and you introduce a theme in your first act that's like the love theme, and then you're at the very end of the movie and you have a shot on someone's face and you're trying to, maybe they look angry, but you play the love theme, you're telling something to the audience. I think Indiana Jones does a really good job of that with the Marion's theme. And when that would come in, in moments that didn't seem like there was a love theme required. And Star Wars too. Star Wars, I mean, same composer, obviously the GOAT, but like a very intense sort of battle scene with like a light flute or a sort of light theme is, you're communicating two different things. What you see is this anger and this battle, but what you're feeling is like this emotions. I don't know. There's a lot it can do.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Now, how many films have you created? How many features? You said 5?
5 features, yeah.
5
so
features. How many total films do you think you've done since you've been making films?
We're counting like a 2-minute YouTube video as a film? Or,
We'll count everything, yeah.
I mean, everything? It's got to be over 100, probably.
Yeah. So of everything that you've made, is there one thing that you're like, I really hope everyone will watch this one film, video, YouTube, whether it's a feature or YouTube?
Gosh. I mean, 31 Candles I'm incredibly proud of. But recently it's been the one I'm like, okay, I made a filmette called Good to See You. It's a YouTube video. It's 44 minutes. I think it's awesome. So I really love people to go watch that. We made it for like no money, and it's kind of like riddled with mistakes, but at the end of it, there's like a really interesting emotional ending. I'm just really proud of what we did. So I kind of point people to that one and say, go watch that.
Good to See You?
Good to See You 1. Yeah, Good to See You 1. Yeah. There's a sequel, Good to See You 2 as well. For those of you who get really into it.
All right. What are you most excited about that you're working on right now?
Well, I'm excited for Bus Boys to come out. That'll come out, I believe, in April-ish, in theaters. And we're about to actually do our color correction next week. And I'm excited for this Yonit Hart script and to build out Romantical. I'm excited for everything. Like I am just excited. I'm excited to build out the company so I can be the green light, and it can be less about how do I make this and more about, when are we making this? Yeah. And yeah, I would say for people listening, like Bus Boys is the next kind of release from my pipeline. It's a silly comedy.
That's David Spade, you said?
David Spade, Theo Vaughn, Tim Dillon, Jay Farrow, Bobby Lee, UFC fighter. Yeah, it's Nate Diaz is the UFC fighter. But it's just, those guys did what I did, which is they said, screw it to Hollywood. No one, we don't want anyone to be involved with this. Let's just go finance it ourselves and go make it. And I was lucky enough to be brought along the journey. So...
yeah. What advice do you have for aspiring filmmakers? So the kids that are kind of where you were when you were growing up and watching Hook. I mean, what would you tell them?
The advice is very simple. The advice is make things, release them, show those things to people. And I hate to say it, but at least for now, I think it's helpful to be public about what you're making and to start building your audience. Because I just believe that's where it's going. I don't know, and I hate that it has to be this way. You used to be able to be a director that like you went on, you went on some late night talk show once and you had a New York Times article and you made a movie every 5 years or 10 years. Unless, again, you're a billionaire, I don't know how you're going to sustain yourself that way. So my new advice is like, be public about what you're making and cultivate your audience and show your work to people and be proud of it and just keep doing that. And I actually think if you do that, you'll make it. And I think it's also important to know when you'll make it. Look yourself in the mirror and really ask yourself specifically what it is you want and what you're trying to do.
Okay. This is the last question. I ask this to every guest. If you could, if you can go back and give 18-year-old Jonah one piece of advice, what would that be?
Get over Betsy. She's not, you're going to find someone down the line who's going to be a lot, you don't have to be obsessed with this one girl who doesn't like you. Now
I'm connecting the dots between Betsy and your obsession with rom-coms. I totally
get it. There you go. It's all connected. That's the thing. The divorced parents who are friends, the forever crush who turns into a best friend. It's all connected.
Nice. Well, Jonah, it's been a pleasure having you. Loved hearing about your journey, shared a lot of wisdom. Thanks for joining us on the pod.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. Thank you for having me, Soundstripe. Honored to be here. And to everyone listening, go make some great stuff.
All right. Take care. Soundstripe is the leading music licensing platform, offering the highest quality music produced by award-winning artists and innovative tools to find the perfect song for your project. Soundstripe has over 100,000 audio tracks along with sound effects and video assets. We provide comprehensive licensing coverage, whether it's a broadcast TV spot, social media video, or podcast. Soundstripe helps turn an average video into an unforgettable story. Learn more and sign up for a free account at soundstripe.com.